Part 4, Blood Vessels, page 701. We'll be moving on then to the physiology of circulation in this chapter, and in particular, we'll be checking into blood flow, blood pressure, and resistance. Blood flow, by definition here, you can read it in your book on that page 701, and it is basically the perfusion of blood to a tissue when the arterioles are open to filling capillaries in a particular tissue. Okay, so you can read through that. The blood pressure is that pressure which is pressing against the interior of the blood vessels, initiated in the arterial system by the systole of the heart, and it is considered up to 120 millimeters of mercury at a resting state is the high end of the situation. Maybe you'd like to be thinking a little less than that, like 118 or 117 over nothing above 80, and in fact below 80. So 120 over 80, systole over diastole, is the beginning of what I would describe as primary hypertension if it is recorded at rest. There are many stressing factors that could change that number, of course. But if there is no stress and one is at rest, then something less than 120 over 80. Resistance is the opposition to flow, and peripheral resistance is usually created by the arterioles. Let's take a look at this diagram over here on page 203, and you'll see that we begin with the heartbeat, and the systole will bring us up, hopefully not to 120 at rest, and the diastole will drop us below 80 at rest, and then that difference between systole and diastole is referred to as pulse pressure. Okay, so pulse pressure, is that defined here? They've only defined systole, mean, and diastole. The mean arterial blood pressure is usually 1/3 of that difference added to the diastole. Okay, so we'll calculate that here. The mean arterial blood pressure is the diastole, assuming that we're considering a, let's see here, a 114 over 75 as a normal blood pressure. That means that the difference between 75 and 114 is the pulse pressure. In this case, the pulse pressure is 39 divided by 3 would be 13. So let's put that in here. Let's put 75 here, and then we'll put 39 here, and we'll put 3 here. So the diastole or the diastolic pressure of 75 plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure, which is 13, will give us 75 plus 13 is 88 millimeters of mercury as a healthy mean arterial blood pressure. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. What are the things that go into resistance here is blood viscosity. And so there are ways to manage blood viscosity through prostaglandins and the use of such things as COX inhibitors, cyclooxygenase inhibitors, like aspirin or ibuprofen, that kind of sort of thing. And so the stickiness of the blood, as it were. And then there's other things that can be used, of course, but then there's total blood vessel length. If you live in a tall building, you may be waiting a long time for warm or cold water to change in your tap if you're on the lower floors. And at any rate, the larger the individual, particularly when it comes to obesity, there can be a tremendously different change in blood vessel length, and this creates resistance. So one of the quickest ways of decreasing blood pressure in some individuals, at any rate, is to simply go on a diet and lose the weight, which is, of course, not a simple process, but the concept is simple. And this will actually reduce the total volume and reduce the blood vessel length and make it more manageable for a given standard heart for a particular body, proportionately to take care of the pressure and make flow proceed. Okay, so blood vessel diameter matters, and we can also see that in this diagram right here. Again, when we consider over here pressure, and at the bottom here we're considering different diameters of blood vessels, that when we get to the arteriole, everything, how shall I say, the pressure goes through an inflection point. So we go from this type of curve, it inflects and it becomes this sort of curve. So basically the loss of pulse pressure here is because of the arterioles. It's lost. The arterioles are providing the peripheral resistance. Okay, so we can increase peripheral resistance. We saw that in previous chapters when we studied the role of angiotensin. Renin-angiotensin aldosterone cascade brings us the increase in blood pressure that's needed in order to serve the kidneys and get blood into all of the areas that require perfusion. Okay, so the arterioles can be activated with angiotensin peripherally and increase resistance, increase blood pressure. In some cases, an increase of blood pressure over long periods of time on a, how shall I say, a repetitive basis. Some people are hot reactors. They respond strongly and passionately to many things in life, and they might actually be bringing about a state of primary hypertension through this practice of responding with great intensity to all that's around them. Okay, you can see that the capillaries again present also this important differential in pressure, and then finally we get to the venules, veins, and to the vena cava, superior inferior vena cava, on the way to the heart. Okay, so I want people to remember this basic formula, that first of all we need a blood pressure that is less than 120/80, and you can pick something modest like this. It's not a huge drop below that margin. And then if you take that difference, which is the pulse pressure, and take 1/3 of that difference and add it to the diastolic pressure, then you get the mean arterial pressure. And that's indicated by the acronym here, MAP, or sometimes they call it MABP. Okay. So then when we get to something that we referred to before as venous return, basically one of the things that I described was the idea that after for instance, a cross-country workout, the coach will say, don't sit down after the 8-mile workout that people have gone through. Instead, walk gently and slowly, drink some water, and as you're walking, the musculature of the legs and thighs and gluteal region are going to massage the blood back up to the heart. So in essence, one is helping the heart at this time of fatigue after a workout and not causing the heart to do all the work. So having some venous return, having an easy walk is going to bring about blood flow throughout the body, and in particular the parts that might have gotten tired during a workout. Over here we have one of the rare diagrams that ends with the heart expressing ANP, and we'll pick that up in our next part.